It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit of what we have been doing in the course of the SCOPE Bioenergy and Sustainability study. So SCOPE was created in 1969 to help the UN Council in problems of the environment, problems caused by humanity to the environment or problems of the environment that affect humanity. And since then it has issued quite a good number of reports. This is volume 72. For you to have an idea, it was SCOPE who launched the study on the ozone layer depleting, and that led to the Montreal Protocol that was very successful in decreasing CFCs. What we did was, over the course of 2 years, FAPESP, who is the State of Sao Paulo research funding agency in Brazil, was invited to lead the study on bioenergy, and we invited 137 experts from 24 countries, and over 2 years we developed a number of background chapters that were used to define what would be the best practices and the way forward towards the sustainable expansion of bioenergy in the world. It covers the current status of bioenergy, the potential for expansion. It studied how bioenergy performs in the energy security, food security, environmental and climate security, sustainable development and innovation. It looks at bioenergy in developed and developing regions. It has numbers, cases, it points to issues, and most importantly, we asked authors to contribute with possible solutions to those issues. So there are a number of boxes in the volume where you can look up at things that appear to be an issue a couple of years ago. We found now that we have solutions. In parallel to the report, we produced policy briefs. I have a couple of copies here, and we have been launching these policy briefs, as Angela mentioned, to policymakers and in venues that we think would help us disseminate our findings. So we launched this in Sao Paulo at FAPESP, then at our Federation of Industries in Brazil. Then we launched here in Brussels at the EU Sustainable Energy Week. 2 weeks ago, we launched at the World Bank in Washington, D.C. Next one will be in Nairobi, probably next May. So we are making an effort to let people know what our conclusions are. And in the back page of this policy brief, there is a short summary of the way forward. So if you have at least the time to take a look at that, it puts very clearly what the main messages are for policymakers. So bioenergy nowadays contributes to around 10% of the world primary energy matrix. Our energy matrix is 87% non-renewable, derived from fossil fuels. But modern bioenergy in this share here contributes to only 3.5%. Most of the bioenergy we have today is traditional, inefficient burning of wood in developing countries mostly. So modern bioenergy has a very little contribution, but you will see that even with this little contribution, it has been able to displace locally large markets for fossil fuels. Most of the bioenergy, the modern one, is used for heat, a little bit of bioelectricity and liquid biofuels. But the prediction is that by 2050, biofuels will be contributing to road transportation to around 30% of the road transport liquid fuels. So we expect that in 2050, we're going to have over 2 billion cars in the world. We expect that there will be advancements in automotive technology to improve efficiency of using biofuels, because nowadays what we have is gasoline engines that were adapted to using ethanol. In Brazil, for instance, we have flex fuel engines that you can add any mixture of ethanol to gasoline, any blend. But the efficiency of these engines decreased. It was better when we had ethanol engines, dedicated ethanol engines. Now the efficiency is much lower than using gasoline. So we expect that we will have advancements in technology here. Around 20% of the cars, of the fuel will be derived from electricity, hydrogen, and gas. But biofuels are expected to contribute to around 30%. Even though we have only 0.7% of the world's primary energy corresponding to bioenergy, to liquid biofuels, we have blends adopted in over 50 countries, mostly because of mandates to decrease emissions due to climate change. And countries are using from 5 to 27% blends. Brazil is the 27. Most countries use from 5 to 10%. And while cars, we have the possibility of using electricity or natural gas. In the aviation sector, we don't have this option. So this number is actually outdated. I don't know if you know, but we have had since 2011 more than 3,000 commercial flights using biofuels already. The aviation industry is very committed towards substituting kerosene with liquid biofuels. The blends that have been used are up to 50%, and this is drop-in, and they come from cooking oil, jatropha, camelina, algae, a number of different crops. And they are doing something that's very positive, which is they are coordinating the development throughout the whole chain. So the production side, the supply chain, and the conversion technologies, all the logistics, because the flights need to arrive to a place where there will be biofuels as well. All this is being coordinated, so it's a good advantage for them. They are proposing to be carbon neutral by 2020, so it's a big challenge, and have reductions of CO2 in the amount of 50% by 2050. So some of these planes have been flying for more than 6 months now with no damage to the engines, and several pathways are on the way towards commercial approval. What we have so far is the Finazine route that has been approved. So in all different kinds of climate scenarios, if we want to restrict our temperature increases to not higher than 2%, all these scenarios show a contribution of bioenergy in an average of 25%. So it's not that bioenergy is recommended. It's essential that we move towards bioenergy, or we may not achieve the reductions in GHG emissions that we have to. So in this graph here, the percentage is in blue. You see it's always around 15, sometimes higher than 40%, but the average is around 25%. I mentioned that we have over 50 countries that are using mandates, but not only liquid biofuels, we also have bioelectricity, biogas and heat, with examples of lessons learned and good practices all over the world. So in the Scandinavian countries, we have 20% of the energy matrix coming from wood pellets that are substituting for coal. Germany has a large project on biogas. China, biogas from waste. Mauritius is a good example of substituting 20% of their electricity by burning sugarcane bagasse. US substituted 10% of their gasoline with maize ethanol. Brazil substituted 50% of the gasoline using sugarcane ethanol. And this is using only 1% of our land, but not really 1% because we do sugar, we produce sugar in parallel to ethanol. So it would be around 0.6% of our land is used to substitute 50% of our gasoline. So it's not a small deal. So nowadays what we have of liquid biofuels is over 100 billion liters produced worldwide. And bioelectricity is around 1 exajoule. Remember that our current matrix is 550 exajoules, okay? On the liquid biofuel side, we have most of the production from the US, ethanol from maize, then we have sugarcane ethanol, mostly from Brazil. We have a number of crops producing biodiesel, soy, oil palm, and rape. We have a new diesel coming, renewable diesel, that's called HVO, hydrotreated vegetable oil. And we have biopower from wood. So this is pines, firs, spruce, eucalyptus, poplar, and willow. All of them reduce emissions. So sugarcane can reduce up to 67% emissions, maize up to 42% when they're using natural gas. In average, these oil crops reduce by 40%. When you substitute coal with wood, you can substitute up to 93% if it is a renewable planted wood. All of this, the most sustainable at this point is sugarcane ethanol. And it's possible to plant this in over 100 countries that in the world produce sugar from sugarcane but are not producing ethanol from sugarcane. So we set over this question on if there is enough land available. When we started this project, it was like the big question was all over. There is not enough land, there will be competition with food, etc. And Jeremy Woods from Imperial College did a very good job on this, and the question now is kind of put to rest that there is enough land. So in the world we have 13 billion hectares of land. What we are using nowadays is less than 13 to 60 million hectares. When I say less than 13, it's because it's not used only for energy, it's also used for other co-products, so you have to take that into consideration. And up to 60 because of traditional, because we don't really know, so this might be an overestimation, because we don't really know how much land is being used for collecting wood. What we calculate we need by 2050 to have bioenergy contributing to 25% of the world's matrix. That would be from 100 to 200 exajoules. We would need from 50 to 200 million hectares. So that would be from 0.4 to 1.5% of total global land, or 5 to 20% of rain-fed, because we don't want irrigation. Okay, so this is considering no irrigation. So there is enough land, but for expansion, it's mostly concentrated in Latin America and Africa, even though I will show you there is potential for bioenergy production in other areas. Most of the land for expansion is available in Latin America and Sub-Saharan Africa. So I did this exercise to try to convey how much land that would really be, because it's hard to imagine how many hectares. 100 billion liters of liquid biofuels that I talked about, that would be conventional ethanol, biodiesel, HVO, that corresponds to a Nicaragua. That's the amount of land we are using for liquid biofuels. For bioenergy, considering traditional as well, it would be a UK plus Iceland. Okay? The amount of land that we need would be, let's start with 50 million hectares, would be a Spain. Food production and arable land would be 1.5 billion hectares that we have nowadays. That would be around Russia. Forests would be 3 billion hectares. That would be Europe and Asia and all this here, and a little bit here. Urban is Egypt. All cities together combined urban areas amount to around 100 million hectares. Then you have others, which is Africa and Oceania. This is land that's not in use for any economic purpose. And then you have pastures. Pastures are huge. It's 3.4 billion hectares. It would be Canada, US, Brazil, Peru, Argentina, and Mexico. And we have planted forests here. It's Bolivia. Okay, planted forest is around 100 million hectares. So we expect that most of the bioenergy will expand into these pasture regions. And the reason for that is that pasture is extensive. It is, most of it is not up to a good efficiency. We could have 4 more cows by hectare than we have now. In Brazil, we say we have lonely cows because there's 2 little cows in farms, and we have something that it's called a sentinel cow. Because in Brazil, traditionally, to stimulate land occupation, if you could put down the forest and put a cow on it, and the cow stayed there, you could keep that cow there for 20 years, the land is yours. So traditionally, people would put down the forest to put cows there. It is not for meat. It's a sentinel cow to say you're occupying the land. There are calculations that say that if we could bring the poorest pastures up to 50% of the maximum, so not the maximum density, we could more than double the amount of global stock of grazing animals, and that 40% of pastures in the world have no livestock on it. So there is plenty of land for that. So, but what can we really put there? Because some of that land is not really good. A lot of the land is degraded, but there is a big debate on that. Some of the land is marginal, and people say it's not really marginal. We don't want to talk about marginal. But what are the crops that we could be using? So it's calculated that we could, on surplus good quality agriculture and pasture land, produce 140 to 290 exajoules per year. And remember, our matrix right now is 550. So it's a lot. It's a lot of potential that could be coming out of biomass. But in fact, if you try to occupy water-scarce, marginal, and degraded lands, your yields will go down to around 80 exajoules per year. So there is need to develop crops that are more resilient to this kind of lands, more adaptable to this kind of soils, and it's most important that we develop drought-tolerant cultivars. And we have to remember that even though we are producing biomass to decrease emissions, climate is going to have an impact on yields, and it's already happening. This is happening in Brazil right now. Sugarcane yields decreased for the last 2 years, sometimes because of too much rain, more recently because of not enough rain, and this has created a lot of problems for the sector. So future climate resilient and drought tolerant plants are something that we have to keep developing. I'll give an example of sugarcane, just so you know that some of these crops are already in preparation. Sugarcane has historically increased yield 2% every year on the crop side and 2% every year on the processing side. So every year we had an increase in 4% since the 70s when we started the ethanol program in Brazil. So we did have an increase, but more recently we are starting to see that we have reached a plateau. And one of the reasons that this might be is that we are using a very narrow genetic basis. So commercial average in the world of sugarcane is 84 tons per hectare. In Brazil, it's around 70, 75. And the theoretical maximum is 380. And this is a calculation that we had with using breeding and commercial data from a lot of countries. So it is quite important that we try to achieve higher yields, and the breeding programs need to aim towards really evaluating their germplasm. And what we did, and this is work that we analyzed the pedigree of sugarcane varieties in Brazil. In the beginning of the ethanol program, 70% of the land was occupied by 5 cultivars. Now we have 10 in average. So we did double the number of cultivars that are in use. But when you look at all these cultivars, they are siblings. Genetically, they are very similar. Sugarcane is a man-made plant. It does not happen in the wild. And it was created by crossing 2 ancestor genotypes. Saccharum spontaneum, which has a very high yield, and Saccharum spontaneum, which has a low yield but a very high sucrose content. And they kept back crossing Officinarum into the cultivars to increase sugar. But the yields now are kind of leveling. We reached, I think, a plateau. So what the breeding programs are doing in several countries is to go back to the ancestor genotypes and increase the variety of genes from spontaneum into the genome. And they are creating what we call now an energy cane. Spontaneum is very tolerant to drought, to stresses, to diseases. So this makes a very robust plant that is in 2 years probably already commercial in Brazil with 200 tons per hectare. So this is already commercially being applied in an ethanol, cellulosic ethanol plant in the northeast of Brazil, this energy cane, and they are able, without irrigation, to get to those 200 tons per hectare. It depends, I think, a bit on the climate, and you have to have this adapted to different conditions. But then if you go and you look into marginal land, we have examples of willow on stony dry land. And I hear about this a lot from Angela, who provided this nice image. She also sent me examples of willow being used alongside river as a riparian filter, and also miscanthus, who's very similar to sugarcane. And we recently sequenced the sugarcane genome, and I know miscanthus is also having the genome sequence, so we may have more biotechnological tools soon to improve these grasses. All that I talked about on sugarcane is non-GMO. It's not genetically modified. All those cultivars, they are just traditional breeding. In the US, there is a good potential for high yields of miscanthus, very large area where miscanthus could be put to use, and some farms are already using it, but the US is mostly dedicating its program to corn ethanol. And it's very difficult to imagine that those corn would have such higher yields in other regions of the world. So maize ethanol is not seen as the future crop. Summarizing what I talked about regarding the biomass side, we have mostly sugarcane and maize in use, so those are sugar and starch plants. We have oil plants, oil palm, rape, soybean. The size of the circle is how much production is coming from that crop. And those are low technical costs, low development time, but low to medium or low to high sustainability. What we are expecting is that as we develop more these crops, that we will move into lignocellulosics. There's already an example in the US of a supply chain established for corn stover. It took a long time, it took them 5 years. It's reported in our volume, this case. Several examples of using sugarcane bagasse, perennial grasses, and a lot of municipal waste and agricultural residues. So those are still high technical costs, sometimes high development times, but they do promise to give us a high decrease of emissions, even though This has not been confirmed yet because a lot of this these commercial cellulosic ethanol plants are still not fully renewable. They are using for their distillation, for their thermal processes, fossil fuels. So the idea is not that we are going to put just one crop in one particular place. In some cases it may be, but it was very thoroughly discussed from the experts that worked in this report, that we should aim at multifunctional landscapes. So there is a lot of research needed in this, but there are already examples in the world of this happening. So this could happen with the spatial approaches. So this would be strategic placement of the crops on the landscape. It could be temporal approaches. Sometimes you can put one crop and then put a second crop in when you are growing already the next crop, or when you are rotating to replenish the soil. So for instance, with sugarcane, we put peanuts or soy every 6 years, and that increases the soil nutrition qualities. And then at the system level, this is also happening with residue recovery, with straw, and recycling of nutrients, and this is a big challenge because it increases quite a lot the costs. The idea is to have integrated food, energy, and forestry systems, and one thing that has been discussed by the authors is that we need harmonization of policy across the chain, because it is really difficult to work with all these different sectors if they have very different policies. What we found, and there is one chapter that was written together by all of us in Paris. We met, after we produced the background chapters, we met to discuss energy security, food security, environmental and climate security, and sustainable development and innovation. We all met in Paris for one whole week. We stayed at UNESCO and wrote those chapters there. So it was a very good dynamic. I think it was good for people to see that sometimes some of the issues are not really issues, that are solutions. And one thing that I forgot to say is that the experts include people from climate change and also biodiversity. It's not only people that work on bioenergy that participated in this work. And on the food security front, I think the bigger conclusion here is that bioenergy can increase energy access in rural areas, and most of the food insecure people don't have regular energy access. So bringing energy to those regions could improve their capacity to generate funds to buy food, their resilience against food shortages because they can preserve better their food, also reduction of losses, and most importantly, it brings infrastructure and agriculture modernization. So this is something that's already happening, and I have an example that's a nice example, where in Mozambique they established a sugarcane plantation and they had to negotiate with the landowners. In Africa they have a land tenure issue that they have to solve, but the mill owner negotiated with the farmers to use their land to produce sugarcane, and in exchange they would get electricity and irrigation. So the mills irrigated. So in parallel to producing another crop with another product, getting more money, they were getting more food. So this is an example, a real world example of this happening in Africa. So we have to be aware that we are talking about crops, we are talking about water, we are talking about soil, and there is a very big interaction on the water and soil issues. There are examples that we see already, evapotranspiration, positive changes when you substitute, for instance, pasture into sugarcane or into perennial crops or forests for production of wood for energy. Also, when you substitute pasture with crops, you increase soil carbon sequestration, and you decrease the amount of fertilizers that you need. For instance, we use vinasse, which is an industrial residue from the ethanol production. We fertilize back into the field and bring water, so you're recycling both water and nutrients back into the into the soil. So it is something that we need to be aware and manage well, and there are examples already of actually putting energy crops that will clean water. There are examples of willow that cleans, depollutes water from other activities of the land. So I talked in the beginning of my talk that most of the bioenergy is traditional nowadays. And what we found is that most of the wood is coming, 30% actually of the wood is coming from native vegetation. So it is a force impinging on deforestation. Collecting wood comes from, is done mostly by women and children, and they burn this wood in low efficient stoves inside their homes with inadequate exchange of air, and this is causing 1.6 million deaths a year, mostly of women and children in the world. So in rural areas, if we bring improved cooking stoves, we already see examples of decreasing indoor pollution with this practice. But more than cooking stoves, if you can bring some technology so that they can add other co-products. So we are talking about small-scale biorefineries that could produce fabrics, that could produce textiles, that could produce biogas, for instance. In India and in Africa, there is a lot of a big project on biogas production. 5 million homes in India and 15 million in China already using biogas. And in Kenya, this stopping of deforestation for burning has saved 75,000 hectares of forest already. So when I talk about this improved technologies, we are talking about new biorefinery systems. There is a very nice chapter on conversion technologies and engines in the volume, led by Helena Schum and Nigro. And this is an example from Norway. So this is an ongoing effort in Norway to produce not only energy from wood, but specialty cellulose, lignin, vanillin, and ethanol. And from these chemicals, you can produce a lot of different products, construction materials, cosmetics, food, concrete, animal feed, agrochemicals, perfumes, and all different sorts of things. So one thing that we found is that the costs are really complicated at this point. People don't want to take up the risk to develop these technologies, so it's quite expensive in the beginning. But if you add more products, you decrease costs. And actually, this industry is seen by the cellulosic ethanol industry as a leverage industry that is going to enable cellulosic ethanol production by producing higher value chemicals. And there's also studies working on the scale, because the scale is also critical. You have to adapt to the local conditions, to the context, and to how much biomass we have. So there are different strategies ongoing where the biochemical and thermochemical routes, the division, are kind of decreasing because the new biorefinery systems are going to use all different kinds of conversion technologies. A lot of the effort in producing this volume was to convey in a clear language for policymakers what would be the path forward. So we have a technical summary that we collected recommendations for policy and tried to look in those 700 pages, what are people repeatedly saying? And what we found is that they are all talking about integrating policy, that there is a need, an urgent need for policy that looks at the whole chain and goes, as Eric Fernandez from the World Bank recently said, across ministries, because it's very difficult to negotiate and it's cost, the cost increase if you have policy that is not really well designed across the whole chain. So the topics that are, I think, repeatedly mentioned in the volume is first that we need integrated policy to meet the demand, considering the scales that are needed, on the biomass supply chain. We need policy to address the high costs and technological complexities of developing sustainable biorefinery systems. We don't think it will be an issue, but we have to keep an eye that we don't compete with local food production. We have to have an eye on bioenergy trade expansion. This is already happening in the wood pellet industry. It has already happened to have trade barriers put in place against ethanol, and a lot of certification and social aspects need to be included in these discussions, because social aspects, what we found is that there is not a lot of studies regarding the social benefits. There is a lot of discussions only on the negative side, so we do need a lot of more studies on the social aspects. Considering that bioenergy among the renewable energy options is the one that has most impacts on different sectors of society, we do need governance, otherwise it's not going to happen, and this is an issue considering Latin America and Africa as the expansion front, and also of course financing scheme and new business models. So some people like numbers. We collected a good list of numbers that you can go, and I think it's being considered a good source of materials if you want to see what's going on bioenergy production now, expansion and benefits to social and environmental development. But some people like stories, so we have a case studies chapter that I really recommend. It tells you lessons learned, do's and don'ts. So we have the Brazilian case with sugarcane ethanol, the agricultural residues case in the US, biogas production in Germany, California and UK, wood pellets and municipal solid waste in Scandinavia, power in Mauritius and in Brazil, so this is bioelectricity, African experience, stories on Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Tanzania, Ethiopia, Sierra Leone, Zimbabwe. These are descriptions of jatropha. A lot of the lessons learned with jatropha are not so good. It is a problematic crop. It has a lot of diseases, and there are examples where you see it not working in two different regions. One of the region managed to meet supply and there was not a buyer, and the other one there was a lot of buyers and not enough supply. So there are many ways to make this go wrong. And then the Asia experience, Thailand used the Brazilian model, adapted it to their local conditions, producing ethanol from sugarcane and cassava and palm in Malaysia. And we did ask all the authors to tell us where were the gaps of knowledge. So we have a chapter on the much needed science. There is a need for agriculture dedicated for bioenergy. A lot of the equipment, a lot of the practices are practices that are used, that were developed for food crops and not for bioenergy crops. So we need to develop new harvesting, transportation, storage, densification, pre-processing, matching of adequately of feedstock to the conversion process, fully renewable processes, also work on the infrastructure and logistics. But there is a lot talked about also on research on the biomass side, and think about that because 70% of the costs are on the biomass production side. So we really need to decrease costs there. So this is a graph done by the people on the environmental and climate security chapter. Bioenergy can be done right or wrong. If you do it right, you can improve soils, water quality and availability, biodiversity and habitat provision that will benefit ecosystem services and our food security. If you do it correctly, it can lead to environmental and climate security, and there are a number of ways to decrease emissions. And I will finish with not such a good note, because I want to give you an example of when it goes completely wrong. And this is an example from Brazil. So in the beginning of the ethanol program, there was a mandate that we did have to change our engines into ethanol engines. Everybody did that because in 1 year, in the 70s, we would not have enough gasoline anymore. So it was a dictatorship at the time. Everybody obeyed and went and changed their engines. I remember when my father went and changed his engine. The car would not start in the morning, would get corroded and things like that. The ethanol price was very high, was highly subsidized, but then the industry worked together and the car problems got fixed, the ethanol problems got fixed, and the cost started to decrease. So the green line here is the cost decreasing. We have a learning curve. We started using ethanol since 1929. So our costs were decreasing and the production was increasing. And the gasoline price was low until it started to get higher and higher and higher, and we had the government subsidizing gasoline. And not subsidizing, it wanted to keep the inflation in check. So it started subsidizing gasoline, but not the diesel price. And the ethanol industry was trying to be more sustainable. So it was investing a lot. It was investing in biotechnology. We were sequencing the sugarcane. We were developing breeding crops. So this was partly funded by the industry themselves. They started harvesting without burning to decrease pollution. So burning was phased out by adhering to an agro-protocol, an ecological protocol that was not by law. It was a volunteered protocol. 90% of sugarcane is not anymore harvested by burning. Then the industry was learning how to protect the soil and keeping the residues, agricultural residues, in the soil to decrease the use of fertilizer and also recycling industrial residues. They were also increasing the pressure on the boilers. This was costly, but they wanted to make more electricity so that they could feed the surrounding cities with electricity. And they were irrigating using vinasse. This is very expensive to do, to bring all this water. These are large volumes of water that are brought back, and the fields are huge. And they work together to protect the remaining forests in the state of Sao Paulo. It's all on the landowner costs. They have to pay. And this, I love this picture. This is the puma. The puma is coming back to Sao Paulo. It has become a problem now because there are pumas in the farms. This is an issue, and it needs to be monitored. Monitoring it takes a lot of money. And what happened was the producer prices started to increasing. Now, from 450 mills that we used to have, we have over 100 bankrupt. The sector is very worried. The government, in view of climate change and the next Paris conference, is promising to increase bioenergy up to 18% in our share by 2050. And I don't know where they got these numbers, but we are already 18%, so they are promising not to increase anything. So it is a matter of policy, clearly. We know how to do it, we have the technology, but we have policy that is not in agreement with development of this sector in Brazil. So thank you very much for your attention. I would like to acknowledge all my scientific advisory committee and associate editors, and thank again Angela for inviting me here, and she did a great job on this volume. Thank you.
My question is around the issue of processing and the supply chain. What are the challenges? What are the major challenges to get this lignocellulose into the supply chain so that we can have a more sustainable biofuel approach as opposed to, going down the old corn route, etc.?
I think the biggest challenge is the complexity of the biomass. We have done quite a lot on the certification side that works on the sustainability aspects, and there is an ISO already established recently for bioenergy. But when the biomass comes into the mill, it comes dirty, it comes sometimes with different qualities. It depends a lot on the soil and how it was harvested. And the conversion technology processes start to become very complicated. And that's why I think it's taking quite a long time to develop the cellulosic ethanol process. What is really needed at this point in terms of engineering process is that you decrease costs and make it fully renewable, and this is an aspect that depends on enzymes. The enzyme costs are expected to be lower, but they are still too high to make it economically compatible with how much the governments want to pay for that. We also want to have the externalities considered, because, for instance, sometimes it's very difficult for you to sell a product if nothing is considered regarding the sustainability aspects that you put effort into. And the lignin as well, developing new uses for lignin. Right now it's mostly being burned, but I showed you one example that they are trying to convert into new chemicals, and that might decrease the cost because those are high valued chemicals. And also, I think the scale. The scale is an issue because if you make it too big, it appears that the costs are inadequately for the scales that you will get, the outcome. So NREL in particularly is developing smaller scales so that you can adapt to the local production schemes, but they're still not yet quite there.
What out of the findings from the scope, what do you think might be a key message that might bring something home to those discussions?
Yeah, we've seen a big debate mostly in Europe regarding ILUC, the indirect land use change. It now has become not an issue anymore, but still sometimes it shows up. People kind of got this into their head that there is ILUC. And we have one chapter that really looked into the literature and how the calculations were being done and how the models were being, what were the assumptions. And over the years, there is a very nice table there that shows that the ILUC factor has decreased. Not that the actual factor decreased, but that the studies that were calculating it came with a lower number of impact. And then our conclusion is that at this point is unmeasurable, unreproducible, negligible. You should not waste any more time on modeling ILUC or funds, because there was also a lot of, it's actually, one chapter said, do not, policy recommendation, do not spend any more taxpayer funds on ILUC modeling. And the other issue is competition with food. What happened with increased food prices most probably was increased oil prices. There is no real evidence except in some local conditions in Latin America. When they started producing corn ethanol in the US, they think that might have been a little impact in Latin America. This is FAO saying this, but we did not see evidence of biofuels impinging negatively on food, increasing food prices. I think the next biggest question is biodiversity, the impact on biodiversity. I would really be worried about that depending on the governance. So if you really don't monitor and if you really not make sure that the land that's being used for bioenergy does not come from deforestation, if deforestation will negate the emissions, so the reduction of emissions. So my biggest worry is that we make a very good use of land that does not lead to deforestation.
What is your strategy to influence the energy policy of EU?
Yes, thanks. We are launching, we have organized a number of launching events. We have, through our contributors, distributed the policy briefs and asked them to contact whoever they think would profit from knowing of this work. We tried to publish this in Science 3 times already, and Science says, oh, no, not really interested. We decided to move away from this debate on biofuels, and yeah, we tried. So it would be good if we managed to do this with a policy forum in Science. We were not successful. So we don't have a lot of funds. We are up against the lobby of many industries, and we are just scientists, and we are not really funded to go on a big venture of disseminating knowledge. So if you have any suggestions on how we could really put this in the hands of the right people, I can try.